Welcome to the Coast Podcast. I'm Emilie, a virtual assistant agency owner who left Amazon in 2019 to build my dream.
And I'm Whitney, a freelance writer and communications consultant who never felt at home in a cube farm.
We didn't see many people paving their own ways like we decided to, so we created this podcast to talk to others who were brave enough to pick a different path. Creatives, entrepreneurs, people doing their careers and their lives their way.
Join us as we learn from them, get inspired, and show you beautiful paths less traveled.
Not every road leads to the coast, but the ones that do come with a great view.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Coast. I'm Whitney Popa. I own a communications consultancy in Edmonds, Washington, and today I'm so excited to be with my people because I am talking to Stef Tschida, founder of Tschida Communications in Minnesota, of all places. And Emilie connected us. Emilie's not able to make it today, but she connected me with Stef because Stef inquired about some of Emilie's services, I think, or replied to something that Emilie sent out. And then after the discovery call, she was like, I think you two should talk to each other. And we had a Zoom chat and loved each other. And she referred one of her people, freelancers, to help me as I'm kind of expanding my business a little bit. And so this has been a long time coming to interview Stef about her business, her background, and everything. So welcome, Stef. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And before we hopped on here, I was telling you, all right, I want to give you the stage. I want to know all about how you got to your business, what you did before, like give us the whole history and rundown.
Sure. So I am someone who's always loved communications. And I thought that would actually take a path into journalism, and I dabbled in that, and that didn't work out so well. Some interesting stories in that space for sure. But I've spent my entire working life up until a couple years ago in big corporations that are based in the Twin Cities. And so, just really cut my teeth at a young age on PR and social media and client communication and internal communications. And then 3+ years ago now, decided to go out on my own so I could have a little bit better balance with some young kids at home. I often find myself in these corporate environments supporting the CEOs of these companies, which is a really great job, but has not always lent itself super well to some of the personal stuff I've had going on.
And how old are your kids?
Oh, sure. They actually both have September birthdays, so they are turning 5 and 10 this month.
Oh my gosh. That's like my kids. They're 5 and 3 in May. Both May birthdays. Yeah. And are you saying too, like you are supporting the CEOs who might want you to work when you're not available to work?
Yeah, absolutely. So my sort of origin story, I had never considered starting my own business before. I very much used to buy into the security or faux security, if you will, of like the biweekly steady paycheck, that whole thing. So that was my reality for about 15 years. But one day I ended up missing getting to take my son to his first day of kindergarten because a CEO I was working with moved a meeting up by like 3 hours. And I felt like I needed to go to that meeting 3 hours early, and I missed getting to take my son on his first day, like really unexpectedly and last minute. And I do think that was the universe pushing me, because like it just almost felt like a lightning bolt out of the sky. Like, hey, maybe I should do my own thing. And so it was a painful moment, and that was not a fun day, but I think it was very much like one of those inciting moments to be doing this, which I'm so grateful for.
Mm-hmm. And you have all of this experience. It's like very similar to me where it's like I had enough nudges that finally one was like too intense to ignore that I was like, all right, now's the time and the opportunity and I feel ready-ish. You're never ready, but ready enough to say, like, there's enough that I don't want to keep doing and sacrificing for myself, that it's time for me to take this plunge. So I'm curious, like, if it sounds kind of similar where it was like, oh, I'm going to do this now, like if you weren't like planning for years in advance and had this business plan and like, these are the services that I'm going to offer, like what that looked like for you initially, if you're just like, I'm going to do what I know, but like for different or smaller clients, or if you were like, I'm just going to take these pieces that I love and make that my menu. What did that look like for you?
Oh yeah. So, well, so it took me 9 months from the day I missed my son's kindergarten drop off before I could exit my corporate job. So, yeah, it was like, okay, I'm ultimately doing this to try to see my kids more, but I'm seeing them less than ever because mommy's getting up at 4 a.m. to do this freelance work before she goes into this very intense job all day. So, it was such an interesting time, and it's honestly kind of a blur, but I basically built up my freelance business to the maximum that I could while holding down that full-time job. And then it became, okay, like what's that tipping point? What's that other thing that's going to like let me leave corporate and give me a full plate of work? Because I am the main breadwinner in our house. Like I definitely didn't have the luxury of just like saying, forget you guys, I'm out of here. That one day I missed my son's kindergarten drop off. So and finally a contract came along that was honestly just more big corporate stuff. So I have pivoted my business multiple times as I've just honed in and gotten closer and closer to what I ultimately want to be doing. But that bigger corporate contract came along, it enabled me to leave. So really I didn't even do that much thinking about what do I want to offer, what like I just started working full time in my own business. And then, it checked some boxes. It got me out of corporate. It got me out on my own, a few different things. But then I quickly looked around and realized, gosh, if I felt like some of this big corporate stuff in-house was sort of pointless, like we're on version 56 of this internal document that doesn't really matter, now I'm just doing it as a 1099 and it's really like all the same. So yeah, it's getting me closer, but it's really not where I want to go either.
Mm-hmm.
And so from then I kind of said, okay, I'm keeping this big corporate client that enabled me to leave, my in-house job, but I'm going to build up what I really feel like I'm being called to do, which is mid-market, small business, nonprofit work. And I'm going to build that up until I can then lovingly let go of that big corporate client. So it's just been constant like double clicking, maybe, if you will, of like, what do I really want to do? And yes, I'm accomplishing some things with some of this work, but how do I truly get closer and closer to what I just have a business of things I want to be doing? And I'm really excited to report 3.5 years into this, like I am there now. I don't have any gargantuan clients anymore. I'm serving all, clients who I adore and am rooting for, who are doing good things in the world. And now, of course, that doesn't mean it's easy every day, but it's the space I want to be in. And it's taken 3.5 years to get there.
Yeah. And I'm sure you'll pivot again. I'm constantly pivoting. Like, I feel like it's like an every 6 month thing. But one of the questions that people ask me a lot too, or ask within, and I hate calling it freelance because I consider myself like my own company, but that's kind of just the umbrella term that people use. Like in the freelancing community, people ask about pricing a lot. And if you have different pricing for different sizes and types of clients. And for me, of course, the answer is yes. Like a big corporate client, not only is the scope of work different, probably, and bigger, but they can afford more. And even my husband, he's like, use that big client to support the other ones. And I think people can kind of lose their way when they're like, this is my price for everyone. I'm even experimenting on my website to vet people better for when they come through, to have some sort of like baseline or ballpark pricing so that they know this is usually what this costs. And then I also have like an asterisk for them of like, if you're a small business, like let's talk about what could work for you. And I'm starting to offer more smaller, like one time I'm doing like these magnetic messaging like intensives for them so that they can get something that I would usually offer on retainer in like a day or two, and have that kind of access and have those needs met without it being like an ongoing couple $1,000s a month sort of situation. So I'm curious, like for you when you had that big client, you're like, okay, this is going to be my launching pad. This is going to support me monetarily getting to a place where I can have multiple small clients, and how you think about pricing and like time management with them.
Yeah, well, it speaks to like, I guess I wasn't even thinking about this, but another pivot I've done even since serving this new audience, which is for me, I do some like pro bono and some things where I engage more one-on-one with folks, but I've also realized I could have 45 really small clients and there's a lot of admin and there's, they're still taking up headspace, or I could maybe go for like 15 bigger but still not gargantuan clients, like mid-market clients, bigger nonprofits. So I'm doing the same thing, Whitney. Like when a solopreneur reaches out to me, I will say, well, this is my package price for that offer, and like just want to be really super upfront about that if this isn't the right price for you, I can refer you to some other folks who can do something different. But just really trying, oh man, the first few years too, like I was so eager to get these smaller clients and feel like I was building that out. I took clients that were just like $900 for a few weeks, or what, like just these little, what I now consider kind of nibbler clients. And it was holding me back in a way, even as much as I love doing that work. So what I'm trying to do is take bigger paid clients and then kind of scratch that itch with more of the pro bono things that I do.
Mm. Yeah. So that's like both ends of the spectrum. And something too that I love that you do, you referred me one of your freelancers, or somebody who is starting off his freelancing career and now has his own consultancy. And I just put him on my website because I think he's enough a part of my team that he obviously deserves a place there. That, when we talked, you were like, and I pay them $100 an hour. And I was like, Jesus, like that's what I want to be paid. Like, well, I mean, I don't do hourly, so I wasn't even thinking of it that way right then. But I was like, of course they should all be paid that much money, because this art and science that we do is so important. And I love that, like you say, 15 clients. To me, as one human, I can't handle 15 clients. So you have a team of people who support you, and they are all paid well. Was that something that you started at the beginning of your company, or like came over time? Because I know that, like, kind of a build it and they will come thing works, like as far as manifestation and all of that. But it's also hard to justify for people who are like, I have like 5 small clients. How can I be paying multiple other people $100 an hour to support me there? So what was your thinking around bringing other people on and paying them so well up front?
Yeah, yes, anyone who's doing communications work on my team, I've got some other people who are in slightly more supportive types of roles that get paid less, but $100 and up is what I pay people. And really, it's because I'm trying to build a team of folks who are known as being really seasoned and like we can come in and hit the ground running. And I frankly just need that level of professionalism and experience so I don't have to babysit the work, right? So in most cases, yeah, you're maybe a writer, but you're also, gosh, I need you to project manage, I need you to be client facing, I need you to do these things. And when I sort of hire at that level, it creates that expectation that like you're not just fulfilling and executing work, I actually need you to keep this engine running so I don't have to have my fingers in everything anymore, because that was slowly killing me, right? So and yes, the person you're talking about is just one of the most fantastic people I've gotten to work with, and I'm so glad that you're working with him too, and help, we're both kind of helping give him his start, and hopefully he'll have a little empire in a few years and he'll be, hiring people and doing things too, and it just keeps the cycle going. So that's awesome. I'm so glad we get to share that.
Yeah, and what's been really cool about my relationship with a lot of people lately, this is kind of a tangent, but important because we're all in the people business, is when you connected with him with me, you didn't know that we had this shared experience of losing our dads, and he had lost his dad only like a few months beforehand, and I have that experience as well. And it came up like when we were chatting, because that's part of why he wanted to start his own business. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I keep getting met with people who I can support in that way just by existing and knowing that we're in the same club. I'm not saying that I'm out there like mentoring him through his grief by any means, because it looks so different for everybody. But for me, at least, like I can speak to my own experience, just knowing that I have that connection with people and that they get it is huge, because that's also part of what started me on my path of leaving my job, of how I was treated in my jobs when my dad was sick and through various like important life things where I was like, wow, I can't be like a whole human and have a life and be here too. So I created what I didn't see for myself, and to be able to support other people through that as well, where it's like he doesn't have to call on the team call and say, hey, my dad is on hospice, and try to not cry and then get reprimanded later that day for not editing something properly or whatever it was. Like in my case, I think it was, I was on the team call, told them that my dad was on hospice, started crying, was embarrassed, and then the next day they moved me off the team because I was doing communications to support Microsoft. And the way that they positioned it to me as communicators, which is really interesting, is we're giving you more time to be with your family, which there's so much wrong with that statement in my opinion. But I know for him too, and I don't know the extent of his experience, but just having that moment of like, he and I get each other because of that shared experience of like a family member and their life putting your life in perspective. And I love that I can, in a small way, support his business and his life, and also just know that we get each other on that very basic level. And you're an example too of somebody who just magnetizes the right people to the right people and builds community. And so I'm super grateful for him in so many ways, especially because I don't have to babysit him. I'm like, here's the brief for you. Like, is this deadline going to work? Let me know.
He's the best. And I am such a firm believer in the universe bringing people together for the right reasons in the right time. And like, that's so cool. I don't think I knew that even just till now, like that you guys had that. And I'm so glad you've been able to like bond over that and yeah, help each other along your path in more ways than one. It's so fantastic. I love it.
I know that most of, well, at least Eric is also like in the Twin Cities. Are most of the people who work for you local, or do you have a virtual team? What does that structure look like for you?
Yeah, most of the people are local. To this period in my growth, I have largely worked with either people who I've actually worked with in a past life or people that somebody on my team has already worked with in a past life. So it has been largely local, though our clients are all over, which is kind of interesting. But I am excited about the opportunity to expand my team even further beyond the Twin Cities area in the future. I think that's really important too. And so I think it's just about like meeting you, getting connected with other kinds of people in other markets. And there's never been a better time to do it because we can all be on Zoom. And it's, even it's funny, even within the Twin Cities, I've worked for over a year during pandemic, right, with people who are here, but I had never met them until fairly recently. We've just been doing the Zoom thing, so they could be anywhere. And there's so much opportunity there that excites me too for the future.
Mm-hmm. It makes me wonder too, and part of the reason I asked is if you're interested at all in having an office for you and your people, or do you think like the future for you is this wholly virtual? They can be where they want. They're all freelancers, not employees.
Yes. Yeah, I'm totally a virtual. I would like to build myself a little office that's better than what I have at home right now. That's like a little more conducive to running a company. But no, and truly everyone I'm working with is such a free agent. I don't know who would want to come be employee number one at Cheetah Communications because they've kind of left that employment thing behind, just as I have, right? And that doesn't mean they're not super dedicated and working super hard and care a lot and like doing incredible work, but they just don't want to trade in that free agent card. And I don't either. I fully get it. So I really just try to leverage that mindset and just work with people who are kind of doing their thing. And they want to have the freedom to work from anywhere. I'm currently talking to you from my car as an example outside of a conference, right? Just like I worry that if I ever got an office, I think it would sit empty quite a bit and I would be the first one to like not show up, so
Yeah.
yeah.
That's why I love the co-working space. They're a client of mine, but I also get to work here. So it's like the best kind of double dipping because my husband and I, we do not share an office well. And the way that he, like his calls, I have no idea what he's talking about. I don't even know what language he's speaking. It makes no sense to me. And I don't want to stereotype the male population, but what I find, I'm going to just stereotype them. They are loud and they talk loudly on the phone all the time, which is not helpful for somebody who is a writer. And he like set up this beautiful little space for me. He got me an extra monitor. I didn't even have a monitor until this year when we put 2 desks in one office, and he's like, I got you all this stuff and set you up. He got me a mouse, he got me a wireless keyboard. And I was like, wow. Because I just, for the past 5 years, have worked on my laptop, and then he hogs the office. So for me, it's been amazing to be here for so many reasons, and it's a nice thing to like pop in and out of. And there are people, I'm sure there are co-working places there too, where you can have an office that you don't use, where like your teammates could pop into. We have offices where at least 2 people or more are included in it. And so it's this awesome, like flexible opportunity for like, if you want a conference room, like I'm sitting in right now, if you want printing, if you want access to other people or the community. I'm talking with them about starting a low level membership for like people who identify as entrepreneurs, just to come in for the networking and like 1 day pass a month. That would be really cool. So it's this nice in between like the home office and a real office scenario. And it's kind of the future.
Do you know what so I don't use a co-working space, so I think they're always super cool when I get to experience them, but I use free conference rooms in our county library system. There are like dozens upon dozens of libraries all over the metro. You can book a conference room that fits just you or a bigger one for free on a moment's notice. And I just kind of park myself near wherever I need to be. And that kind of keeps me going. I moved during COVID an hour outside the metro. So I have this need to like camp out places that I didn't have, a couple years ago. So that's been a lifesaver for me. But I do worry, like for me, a co-working space, I kind of come in, I do my meetings and I usually get out and I kind of kill time in between. So I think a co-working space would probably go underutilized by me. And that's a little bit of part of it. But yeah, the libraries have been great. Someone on my team put me onto that and I've just like loved that.
Yeah, we have our library in the town that I'm in. It just flooded like a couple months ago, and the water damage is so bad that they're thinking they'll be closed for the next like 2 years. They even inquired about using this building to move their library stuff in for the next couple years, and we really considered it. And then we're like, well, they have free internet and free everything, and we're trying to get people to pay, so maybe not. But yeah, it's such a resource. And even for, okay, I imagine that you're a reader. Like,
Yes,
I just posted a blog yesterday about like 5 books for female entrepreneurs that have like kind of changed my life. And I'm curious, like, this is a question that we ask at the end, but since we're communicators, I know you read, and like, what's coming top of mind for you of books?
I'm pulling up my list because I literally I've read 25 books this year so far. One of them that I would call out, and shame on me, I'm not going to know the author offhand, but The Soul Sourced Entrepreneur. I just had that recommended to me from someone in a networking meeting. It's awesome. It's just heart-based business. It's really great. The book Free Time by Jenny Blake, also like heart-based kind of entrepreneurship stuff. And she's all about just how do you implement systems so you can sort of work less but achieve more, make more money. She talks about like scaling joy, which I think is pretty great. And I felt like she just totally was calling me out in the opening pages. It was just all about sometimes how you feel like you're a slave to your business. You've given yourself another job, not that time freedom. So I highly recommend that. I read a lot of like other stuff that isn't like super businessy, but let me just look here. Let me see if there's one other one I could say that might be really good. Business Made Simple by Donald Miller. I love Donald Miller, the story brand
great
guy, and all his stuff. Business Made Simple was just like a nice little primer of here's a little on marketing, here's a little on sales, here's a little on operations. And I dog-eared so many pages. I actually need to go back and kind of see like, okay, what was I supposed to do about that? Because there's just a lot of good stuff there. So those would be 3 that come off the top of my head.
Yeah. And he does the way that
And
he
I'm actually
writes.
returning this book to the library today that I
Oh, that's so funny. I have that built to sell.
built to sell. I need to recheck it out because I never got into it and it's due and they didn't give me an extension. But I like creating a business that can thrive without you, right? It's like just that, like, how do you make things go without you being at the center? So this is going to be back on my list. I just didn't get to it yet.
I read that last year based on a recommendation from one of our also previous podcast guests who owns a wellness center right on the water in our town. And she thinks a lot about scaling and selling her business. And she recommended that to me. I read it last year and it was really good. There's no possible way that I have a business that is sellable at this time. You do, though. You could give all your work probably to your team, which I find like that was a question that I wanted to ask you about, like scaling, because Emilie was one of the first people who actually, when we met in person a couple of years ago at coffee, she was like all about scaling her business. And it was a trigger for me. I was like, I just want to do my work when I want to do my work with the clients that I like to do it for. I don't want to think about scaling. All I could think about was like going from me by myself and managing my own time to like a skyscraper. That's what I heard when she said scaling. And that was a question that, like, it seemed to me like you quote unquote scaled the way that I define it now by having like a team that you delegate a bunch to quickly. And I think you have a business just from the outside that is sellable in the way that they define it in the book.
Interesting. Well, I better get on this book, huh? I better read this book. Yeah, at some point, so honestly, same, like for the first 18 months of me doing this, I was thinking of Stef, the freelance person doing her thing. And there are people who have incredible businesses doing that forever, right? And that's awesome. At some point, I just realized, oh gosh, there's these people coming to me and I really want to serve them and help them, but and I kept just taking it on, right? Like doing more, doing more, doing more. And I finally realized, gosh, I would be so much better served and so would they if I just brought some other amazing, smarter than me people to this team. And then it kind of like once you get used to doing that, it's so easy to do that. And it became like 18, 19 people on this team doing work, not all full time, of course, but involved with different pieces of client projects and everything. And I really do think, like you kind of alluded to it before, I don't say this in like a weird cliche way. I really do just know how to collect awesome people and let them do their thing. Like they're smarter than me. They've got better ideas than me, better experience than me. And I just love to bring them together and just kind of be that person who kind of tells our story to new clients and articulates that to people who might want to come work here, and then let them do their thing and like work their magic. And it's incredible to watch them go because they're fantastic. So yeah, that's kind of how it just happened. And yeah, definitely a lot of growth in the last year in particular. And so just have had to bring on more and more people to support the growth, and really don't want to turn away some of these awesome clients, that are right in that sweet spot of who we want to be serving.
Yeah. How do you define a client that you want to be serving? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, like again, it's changed a lot, right? So at this point, we serve small clients, maybe 3 million would be sort of the floor on that, 3 million and up, all the way up to some mid-market clients that are like 3, 4, $500 million companies. So really big in relative terms, but I come out of billion and billion and billion and billion dollar companies, right? So like still solidly mid-market, but really large companies. And there's different offers that appeal to each of those, and nonprofits as well, right? So the smaller clients tend to come, and the nonprofits come for like marketing support. Help us with thought leadership, help us rewrite our website and redo that, help us with social media, maybe branding, like that kind of external comms stuff. And those mid-market, those larger companies are usually coming to us because they are ready to sort of professionalize how they talk to their employees and be more proactive and intentional about that, as everybody's struggling with retention so much right now. And so we're helping stand up internal communications functions and strategies at like some of those larger companies. It's so much fun.
Cool. And the question, like, I'm already having anxiety even thinking about managing all those things and people. So like, how are you project managing that? And everybody's on Slack?
Yeah, so right. Okay, so we could talk operational systems and that would be super fun. Like I've had to implement a lot of, and I'm not a big process person, but I've gotten support from an amazing member of my team named Caitlin to implement project management software, time tracking software, document storage, and where we chat. And oh, by the way, tweak these things because, like at one point we were storing documents in the project management software and it's not great. And like it's always a work in progress. But, creating some of that technology and bringing that into our business to keep us on the same page. I mean, it's laughable, Whitney, but like at the end of what would it have been? Maybe the end of 2020, I was still tracking my team's time in separate tabs of a Google spreadsheet. And then I would go like transfer it into QuickBooks or transfer it into wherever it needed to go manually. And that just would not have worked with the growth that we did experience. So I'm so grateful to Caitlin for getting those things implemented into my business, right? Now, to your other point, we were talking about Eric. Like, yeah, I mostly work with people I don't have to babysit because I just don't have that time or energy for it actually at this point in my career. So it's really self-starter, kind of self-efficient people. But we've also gotten some specific project management talent on our team because that like it's interesting. I sort of started this business and really clung to this idea that my gosh, all of us were corporate communicators. We had to project manage our own stuff. We all know how to do this. Like we're all going to do this on our own. And yeah, to some extent we do, but then I also sort of went like, well, but actually is that working? No, it's really not working that great. And so there were times that I had to bring in dedicated project management expertise to kind of help us tackle some of these really big projects. It's just like I have a lot of respect for that skill set because it's a really unique brain to operate in that way and think about how to chunk down these big projects into manageable pieces with timelines and all of that kind of stuff.
I mean, I'm sure you and I are both familiar with a work back, but beyond that, I am not a detail person. And I actually used to get that feedback of like, you're not very detail oriented. And I was so offended by it. I was like, I'm in the details. I edit every comma here. I don't know what you mean. But I'm like, here's the idea. I'll do my parts of it and you guys do the rest.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I appreciate about people on my team is like I'm the same way. I have like these crazy ideas. I get on calls and I'm kind of all over the place jumping around. And there's something good about that, but there's something hard about that. And my team is really good about going, okay, we have 5 minutes left in this call. We need to talk about this thing, like stay focused, Stef. And I appreciate that because yeah. And I agree, like often being told you're not detail oriented is said as a bad thing versus like, okay, lean into the fact that then you're like visionary and you're creative and get support to do the things that you don't do as well, right?
Which is not something that my career had much of or people talked about. It was kind of like you said, where we all had to do it all. And there wasn't like, I mean, there isn't really time and space for you to get to know your employees to really keep them in their realm of genius in the way that you're creating and encouraging on your team, which is incredible, which makes me wonder. So you have this team, and you're placing them in all their different realms of genius or letting them decide that too. Where do you come in and decide, oh, I want to work on this project, or this is special to me, or the client really wants me here? Because you are the face of the brand and people are probably coming to work with you. Sometimes I get some insecurity around that of like, oh, if I let them know that I'm offloading to this person, are they still going to be like, this is Whitney Popa? There's certain things like, because mine is mostly based on writing, if it has a byline by Whitney, I'm not going to have somebody else write that, obviously. But there are certain things that I can outsource and delegate in a way that frees up my time to do more of those byline things that I'm passionate about. So my goal too is to get to a place where I'm like, I only do the things that I want to work on, and then I have all these great projects, but they're supporting other people's businesses essentially, and my clients know that.
Yes. I felt the same way as you did for the first several years of this business. Like, okay, it just needs to be me because, yeah, I went and put my name on the company. Maybe not a smart idea way back when I started it and had different ambition. And also, yeah, will it feel like a bait and switch? They're coming here because of our relationship, right? And it's just been really me slowly shifting my mindset over these months and years of, I talk about us as a team now. Always, always, always. And sometimes I have to correct myself, right? Like, nope, this isn't about I, me, Stef. It's we are the team, and just really seeing the power of the team, and really figuring out, like, how do I articulate the power of the team to my clients? And instead of expecting me to be a unicorn and do wonderful graphic design and amazing project management and writing and all the things, no, we flex and we pull in the member of our team, so you don't have to have a team, but you get the benefit of an entire team for your organization through this relationship. So that's been a journey for me, for sure. And then in terms of what I choose to work on, yeah, truth be told, I wish I didn't get drugged down into any of the day-to-day of client work. And that's not reality. But generally I try to play in certain spaces, like I'm doing executive, kind of like liaising with the client, right? So like top to top kind of relationship at an organization where I'm keeping that relationship going. I love to be out doing like interviews and speaking. I do a ton of speaking, networking, business development stuff, like just kind of playing in that space. And then we haven't talked about my essay coaching business, but I love to get time to work on that too, and kind of continuing to stand that up as its own sort of arm of our business. And I love to spend time there too. So, it's fun. Our tracking software is called Toggle, and I code, all my time. And at the end of the week, before I log out on Friday afternoons, I look at the visual it generates for me of how I spent my time this week. And I think about, do I like what that shows me? Does this show me a ton of like, oh, that client's all day to day, like in the weeds. Okay. That client was 15%. I don't know how I feel about that. Or am I seeing that like my wheel is largely networking and biz dev and, standing up that new client relationship and doing interviews and that kind of stuff. So it's a really, like, I don't know about you, but at the end of the week, I can't even see straight. Like, what did I even do this week? How have I spent my time? So getting that little quick snapshot and being able to kind of digest that and think about how I want to pivot it for the following week has been a real game changer for me.
That's cool because you can see it visually. And by Friday afternoon, I don't work Friday afternoons because I'm so fried by then. So I meet with the owners here at the co-working space. We have like multi-hour meetings. And then by the time I go home, I'm like, yep, I'm done for the day. My weekend starts now. And I've loved being able to give myself that, which never would have happened previously because people work when their bosses tell them to in other jobs. And the way that I use my brain now and how much it's working, especially with kids and a family and a house to run, I just can't. And so I love hearing that from you too, like looking at it very visually, because that's like, the numbers don't lie.
It's true. You have to confront it. And I'm with you. I don't do a whole ton on Friday afternoons, frankly. Just kind of like reflective wrap up types of things, easy admin kinds of things. Cause yeah, I'm so done by Friday afternoon, even Friday morning, frankly, if I'm being honest.
Oh yeah. That's why I'm like, this meeting is about all my brain can handle at this point. Like there's no like productive work being done. Does that mean that like, do you try to bucket your days and like Mondays, I'm trying to start doing more of that. Like Mondays are admin and content days, and Tuesdays are more like heads down work and like virtual networking, like this podcast. And it doesn't always work out that way. I also try to sync my work too, which is a work in progress.
I love that idea. No, I know I need to do a whole lot of things differently with how I manage my schedule, and I don't. The one thing I try to do, but even that has gone by the wayside a bit, is like meeting free Fridays. And this summer I kept my kids home, and that kept me honest on Fridays because they're like, hey mom, get off the laptop, and just like think time, spend time with them a little bit more while they were around. So no, I even just like some days I hyper overextend myself on networking, and I am a closeted introvert. And so like, if I have 5 networking meetings in a day, that can really drain me. As much as I enjoy it, it does drain me. So I've even been thinking about like how to color code my calendar, like no more than 2 yellows a day, if that's networking or whatever. Even just also blocking like work time and sticking to it. So I'm not doing the actual work I need to do at 5 a.m. or 10 p.m. I mean, But I've got a long way to go on truly owning and controlling my calendar in the way that I really aspire to. It's not my strong suit.
I think as far as people, like when they would say you're not detail oriented, that would not be true because that's a blanket statement. That is not true with regard to my calendar because my calendar is like sacred to me. And even I started when I was still using Outlook, color coding everything and blocking out time and being super mindful about it. I even have it today. I have my calendar blocked after lunch to work 2 hours on an article that I have due in 2 days. And like, even though nobody's putting time on my calendar anymore, for me, I have to have the calendar manage me that way. I don't know if you do this, but as a recovering like social media manager, I turned off all notifications on everything. So, and you don't have to be a social media manager to feel like your phone owns you, but like what do they call it? Productivity mode on all Apple products. I didn't know that my Apple ID extended from my phone onto my laptop. So nothing comes through on my laptop unless I check it. Like I'll see that there's a number for messages, but I have to go in and be like, oh, I'm checking them. But I don't hear the pings. I don't have any emails come through that distract me. I do choose more often than I would like to check those things, but I make it mine. I also hid my email on my phone. It's not on the bottom of the little bar. If you have an iPhone, I moved it into a folder, into my business folder that I named these like manifesty words of like, I am a boss. It's in that folder. And so I'm proud of that for myself. Like I still check more often than I would like to, but I like even my family, they get so irritated with me because I'm like, you're going to have to text me and then I'll call you if you want to get a hold of me during the day. Everybody knows they cannot access me without my permission. And I love that for me.
Yes. I'm not as good about not checking as I want to be either, but I do not get the little pop-ups when emails come through. I've had disabled that a long time ago. My phone lives almost all the time in like sleep mode, like the do not disturb. I- I'm the same way. I mean, I'm my own worst enemy of like, let me go check this little thing or let me go check that little thing, but I certainly don't need to add to it with like all these things popping up. Almost every app on my phone is like no notifications are allowed, like just in general. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm not perfect in that regard, but I do have a few of those things in place. Like especially I manage like 5 or 6 email boxes for different parts of my life. Like my gosh, I do not need to see every time one of those emails comes through. It would be constant distraction.
Yeah. And you mentioned your essay business, which I want you to touch on more because just a little background for me, for people who don't know this, one of the things that Steph and I first bonded on, I mean, so many things, but my first job out of college when I was interning at Seattle Magazine was coaching for the standardized tests, and all of my students had nicer cars than I did, which, was hilarious. But you've built that into a whole business on its own, which I never even considered. I was just like moving through my PR career, but you've built a second like arm or complementary business to your communications business with college essay coaching. Is it all college or other things too?
Yeah. So at one point I looked at I thought to myself, like, who are some other audiences that would benefit from the kinds of communication support we provide for corporations? And there were a number of things I put on that piece of paper that day. But for some reason, it jumped off the page like high school students who are applying to college because they have to write a bunch of essays these days. It's changed dramatically since I applied to college, frankly, which was not all that long ago, but it's just a different world now. And so I just sort of started playing around with that. Like, okay, what would it look like if I kind of stood up an articulation of why I should serve that audience, right? And I just started kind of doing that. I volunteered to coach some of my friends' kids for free and just kind of figure out how to do this. And it's now a separate part of my business, and I absolutely love doing that work. 17-year-olds really know how to keep it real, as you're doing work with them during the day. It's really fun.
Yeah. The 17-year-olds, though, I have a lot of experience with them. They do keep it so real. It's like on Mean Girls where the mom's like, "You keep me young." I even said that to my kids last night. And I loved working with them. We did one-to-one coaching and group coaching. Where we live, there's a lot of ferry things that you have to ferry to, and my boss and I ferried over to like an island town across the water to teach these kids. I did English, he did math, and he quizzed me the whole way there for the first couple times on these kids' names, because he knew that if we knew who they were, if we called them out, if we recognized them, that would completely change their experience. And so he cut their names in half, first name, last name, and I had to match them together, and I had to know match them to their faces when we were teaching. And I totally believed him, and I was really glad for my sorority experience for that too, because I knew how to remember names pretty well. So whenever they were slacking or not paying attention or just thought they could do whatever, and I looked at them and called them by name, and I had like barely met them, they were like, "Holy shit, this girl's here to like get this done for us." And I just loved working with them and talking to them and keeping it real. Now I'm afraid of them in a little bit of a sense, because they just seem so much cooler than us. But I know if I had that
they are
access
really
to
cool.
them, they are, and they don't get a fair shake. And something that we can touch on really briefly, that I love your experience with essays, are a little bit different than standardized tests in the sense that like they're not telling you how smart you are, because a lot of these kids, they measure how smart they are, their worthiness, by the scores that they get back on these things, or in your case, if they get into these schools that they're having you help apply them to. And I wonder like if they're giving you any of that feedback or talking to you about their experience with like, "Wow, I just suck at writing essays," or what some of those conversations are.
Oh yeah. I mean, this generation, I agree with you. They're so much more thoughtful and like smart and wonderful than I think they get credit for. And I always think to myself, man, if I were going up against these people, me trying to get into college 20 some years ago, like good luck to me, because I would not have been able to compete. They're incredible. But yeah, they're under a massive amount of stress. And, they're so like, I tend to work with really pretty affluent families, really heavily scheduled kids, very driven. And I sort of like admire them. And I also feel sad for them because it doesn't feel like they're getting to be kids in many cases. And they're just so hyper organized and hyper achieving like 24/7. And they're stressed out by life and school. And then they're stressed out in the context of working with me because I'm sitting here trying to help them apply to college, and they feel like it's just like the end of the world, right? This is the biggest thing in their lives. And so I always try to like frame that like, okay, you know what? We're going to have fun doing this because that will show through in the end product. Yes, this is serious business, but we're going to have fun. And don't forget, this is a really privileged problem to have, the problem of which school to apply to and how to get schools to take you. Like, this is still pretty good stuff if we really keep it in perspective. So I just try to bring a little bit of that to my work with them because, man, they've got a lot on their shoulders these days.
Mm-hmm. And it's so cool for you too to be able to have those two arms of your business that are completely different and feed different parts of you, that you're able to feel like you're doing good in different directions and making money, and that there's like a positive energy exchange on both ends. Like you can really see the tangible effects with these kids, which is really cool.
It's so much fun. And honestly, it's so unbelievable to me that the exact kinds of things we help business owners and CEOs and, leaders and companies do, you just go apply the exact same thing to a different context with marketing a 17-year-old kid as a product to an audience, which is college admissions. I mean, not to like deduce it down too much, but that's what we're doing. And the same kinds of ideas work beautifully in that different environment. And it's just fun to kind of play in your head like, okay, well, who else could I serve with communication support, right? The sky's kind of the limit. We're all just out there trying to tell our story and articulate what it makes us unique and all those kinds of things. So it's pretty fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just know from my experience too, working with these kids, it was just so fulfilling in like a different way because you felt like you really were molding their future or being some kind of like positive influence, even if it's just this small moment in time where there is so much psychology wrapped up in it. Plus, you get the benefit of like learning what's cool right now, and
Oh
like
my
why
gosh.
flared like yoga pants and all of that. Like they're reclaiming or whatever. It makes me feel so old. Um,
Yeah.
One of the things, though, that you brought up a few times in both of your businesses that I have been educating myself a ton about too, that it seems like you have absorbed and incorporated into your body and outward, and it might be subconscious at this point, is how you attract people to you. You've said it a few times in different ways, like whether it's through the people who support your business or your clients or bringing these kids on. Do you think about like your marketing strategy and like the feminine energy around it? Because there's a lot of like, even the books you mentioned, there's so much masculine energy. Like I just read the 10X rule last month and I love some of the principles in it, but I'm never going to be like the sales, like always be closing ABC guy. And that doesn't work for us in female run businesses, but you're running two big, in my opinion, not big, like, you know, as like Coca-Cola or whatever, but two like thriving businesses, and you're doing it differently than like probably what the culture, the male, mostly like male forward culture has said previously. Like, do you think about that? Is that like a strategy, or are you just like, I'm out here being me and the right things will come to me because I'm out here like networking from my heart and being soul led with these kids, or however it looks to you?
Yeah. I just really try to lean into being me. And it's not always easy. It can be scary because you often find yourself in the past in environments where you feel like you have to put that in a container and pick and choose which pieces of that you show. I just really try to be me. I also am just a firm believer in showing up every day and doing the next right thing. Like I don't have amazing 5-year, 3-year, even 1-year business plans and projections, but I always feel like I'm being guided and I always feel like it works out the exact way it's supposed to. And it's so easy to look back and see how that's even happened in a fairly intricate way at times. And so I just try to have comfort and peace in the present moment that like if that's always been true in the past, it's always going to be true and it's true right here right now, even if I don't always know what the next step is. And just like that showing up is like 90%, right? It's just showing up, doing the work, doing the next right thing every single day for my business, and then it kind of adds up. That little incremental stuff adds up over time and keeps you going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you've noticed for your business too, like sometimes you're laying that groundwork and that foundation. It can feel like, oh man, like nothing's coming through. And then all of a sudden, bam, you have like 6 client inquiries in 1 week or whatever it is. And I don't necessarily believe in like preaching by any means that like, oh, you run your own business, it's going to be peaks and valleys. Like I don't believe in that, and I try to not think about it that way. You can have consistent revenue, income, like always moving up, but doing it your way and in a way that hasn't been seen as much. And that's why it's so awesome that you're doing all these speaking events too, because most of what we've been cultured and served in a lot of ways has been like pretty masculine energy, at least in my experience of like going out there and chasing things and forcing things to happen rather than being in flow like you're talking about, which I love.
Yeah. I also just try to be like a generous brand. Um and just know that that's always going to come back to me. So, there are people who would say I give away way too much in my speaking or the workshops I run, in terms of my thinking or my process or whatever. But the truth is, I don't think anything we do in my space is like super rocket science. And so, yeah, I can tell you how to do it. I can help you think about how to do it and maybe do some exercises to get you on the path, but that doesn't mean you can do it. Like I still, think you need help to do it, and whether you agree or not, that's, right? Like you'll either want to engage further or you won't as a result of that, but I don't think being stingy with content and information, like maybe that's a female thing, right? I just believe in being a generous brand and that it's always going to come back to you.
I agree. Karma is real. I did my
Yeah.
first like live workshop last week. And then after the fact, because I was so grateful, I was like, it was helping people pitch, because I get so tired of getting such shitty pitches. I'm like, stop cold emailing me. I want to help you.
Yes.
And then after the fact, I was like, oh, well, I'm so grateful everyone showed up, because I'd never done it before, that I want you all, like, I'm going to give you the opportunity. You can each send me one pitch to review for free for you. And when people took me up on it, I was like, I'm so glad that you sent me this pitch and before you sent it out. And yeah, to your point, like, I love giving, I mean, even this podcast, it's free access and information for all these people and how they built their businesses. And sure, it, like, you know, helps stoke our curiosity and learn more about other people. But I hope too that it gives people confidence and helps them learn tools and systems that other people are using to do their own thing if and when they choose. And I love free content. We just have to figure out, for some of us too, of like, okay, what's free? What can I monetize? What can I monetize in a way that's like accessible, but still brings me a little bit something? So there's always that little dance that we're doing. And if I think it's fine, if I don't feel any feelings around giving something away, then I'm fine with it. Like, maybe you would feel feelings and you want to charge for it. That's great. But this thing, I'm just going to give it away, because why not? So yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's do some not so rapid rapids. What are you proudest of in your business right now?
This is a micro thing, but it's actually a big thing. So given the origin of my business, right, missing my son's first day of kindergarten, I always said, even though I'm working my tail off now, I'm the worst boss I've ever worked for, right? There are certain things I will not negotiate, and I just don't have to anymore. So I feel like the universe tested me recently, because now here we are. My daughter is 5 now, right? My son was 5 when this happened. Now my daughter 5 years later is 5. And I was offered a free trip to Lisbon, Portugal with a client to go to one of their internal events. And it would have been me missing my son's first day of school. Not a huge deal. It was just 4th grade, but whatever, right? And my daughter's 5th birthday. And I would like to tell you, I didn't even have to think for a second. I did think about it, but I ultimately landed on the side of, you know what? I'm only going to get a whole day with her right before she's in kindergarten next year. Like, this is my last year. This is what I said I would do, is always prioritize those key moments I want to be there for. And so I am declining this wonderful free trip to Portugal. So I'm proud of that, because that for me is one of those defining moments of, like, I'm in charge of my life, and then I have to own that, right? And I have to make the decisions that align with what I say I want to do. But that felt like a recent victory here earlier in September.
I love that for us. And as a compliment to relate, I was given a lot of feedback from, like, moon goddesses, healers, all my people last year about boundaries. And I was like, God damn it. Like, I have great boundaries. I articulate them all the time. But what I realized over time was that I wasn't holding my boundaries. So somebody would be like, I would be like, this is my boundary. I'm not missing my kid's first day. And then somebody, like a person or the universe or a combination, would present me this opportunity. And then I would be like, ooh, no. And then they would be like, are you sure? And then I would say, okay, fine. And I wouldn't hold my boundaries for myself. That was my boundary issue, not having them, not articulating, but holding them, because I would get uncomfortable when people didn't respect them. And then I would give in. So to me, what I'm hearing is, like, you're saying yes to you. And for so long, I wasn't realizing, oh, I'm not saying yes to myself. Why am I so resentful and drained or whatever? I was saying no to me and yes to them. And that was a boundary issue. And my perspective was off a little bit there. So I love that you were presented that, and that you got to be proud of yourself in that moment for being like, it feels so small. Who can I tell?
Yes, exactly.
Tell us about, since we already talked about books, tell us about a podcast you listened to recently that changed the way you're thinking about your life or your business. You could also mention a book.
You know, I mentioned that free time book by Jenny Blake. So I have just recently started listening to her podcast, and it's really, I mean, I listen to a ton. I could really go on and on. But Free Time with Jenny Blake is a podcast I recommend. It's just little, like, real life tips and tricks for productivity and, like, creating more freedom and time space in your life and your business. And she brings on a lot of guests, and it's a really good one.
Cool. That's awesome. I'll have to check her out. I was driving, when you're driving on a long road trip and you get all these opportunities to catch up on your podcast. And I had two in a row. I don't know if you'd know Dave Asprey, but he's like building all these businesses to help us live forever and age backwards, and cured all his own like obesity, brain fog, all of these things. And he's the guy who invented bulletproof coffee, like et cetera, et cetera. He has so many businesses. And he apparently was doing the rounds at all these health podcasts, because I had two in a row that he was telling me all the things that he was working on. And I was like, dang, Dave's here. And then of course now I'm listening to his podcast.
That's so good. I was going to say Donald Miller's Business Made Simple podcast is also super good. And it's really quick, like 15, 20 minutes. And I just like, I really could go on, but those are a couple really good ones.
All these people whose books I read who I didn't even know they had podcasts. That's great.
Right? Everyone has a podcast now. It's cool.
Yeah. It's very democratized now, which I appreciate.
Yes.
What would your last meal be?
Oh my Lord, where to even begin? I mean, that's the hardest question you've asked me times 20. I mean, I don't want to sit and make you listen to me belabor it. So probably like just really good, like meatloaf, kind of that Midwest meat and potatoes thing, like meatloaf, mashed potatoes, something like that, probably, without thinking it through too much.
Yeah, I was really hoping that you would say something Midwestern, and you delivered.
But I could deliberate on that for like 30 minutes and give you so many options.
Yeah,
like my favorite topic.
It would be impossible for me to answer, because there's so many things I love that I'm like, what time of day am I dying? What's the right meal then? And like, what cuisine am I into right now? Like last week, I really wanted some Thai food, and I was like going out to lunch this week. So I was like, maybe I'll have Thai food then, but I needed to scratch the Thai food itch then. So I had Thai food. Now I'm like craving Mexican food. And so it's just this whole thing.
Yes, I'm with you.
This one might be hard for you, or it might be super easy. What's the best business purchase in the last 6 months that you've made under $100?
Ooh, I think I would say one of these pieces of software for my team. So Toggle for time tracking, or ClickUp for project management and task assignment and deadlines and stuff. Now, collectively across my team, those licenses cost more than $100, but a single seat, I'm quite sure, is much less than $100. And they're just literally life-changing things for being efficient. So I can't recommend that stuff enough.
I'm glad that you mentioned ClickUp too, because when I was consulting with a client last year and I was like tasked with coming up with which project management system to use, I landed on ClickUp for us. And I really, really liked it. I think none of them are perfect, but I used them all and I really liked ClickUp. I thought it was super simple overall.
Yeah, same. No, you're right. None of them are perfect. But I'm just like a novice user, but Caitlin on our team is constantly showing me the fancy, really amazing things ClickUp can do. So we're always leaning more and more into like using it to automate and using it to keep us organized. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And as like a quick aside, when Emilie and I actually were supposed to go together to San Diego last year, and ClickUp is based in San Diego. And so she got COVID and I was there by myself feeling like so out of my element. It was like the first time since COVID and everything, I'd been away from my kids on my own and like, what am I doing here? And without a mask, it was like right after things started opening kind of on the West Coast. And I saw so many ClickUp vans. I was like, maybe they're trying to make me feel like at home, because I did so much work on ClickUp at that time. But it's based out of San Diego. So they would drive these vans around and make me feel like, oh, you're with your people.
It's hilarious you say that, because I went to San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego this summer for various work trips, and ClickUp billboards are everywhere in every one of those cities. Like they own California for billboards, and it really is kind of fun to like watch them. I'm like, oh, they're a bigger deal than just Cheetah Comms, clearly, obviously, right? But I had no real perspective, not living in that world normally, like, but they're a pretty big deal. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love them. And even like, I'm sure Caitlin knows these terms, like even the way they set up like the approval process through their project management. They have these like Scrum and like 5 different ways that you can set those up. And I'm like, I don't know what these mean, but like, I like that it has to be reviewed and then, you know, approved and closed. And so it's kind of satisfying.
It's amazing.
Last question. What is lighting you up lately?
You know, I'm going to say like a real old lady answer. I'm getting more sleep as it gets darker at night. That's helping me a lot. Like, I think I don't always realize how when I'm tired, I'm just not my best self on any level. And like some of those nights that you wake up and you're like, I genuinely slept enough last night, man, the whole day is like smooth sailing, at least for me. So the earlier nights, more sleep, that is lighting me up right now, because I feel like it's rocket fuel for all the things I'm trying to do all day.
No, that my husband and I were just talking about that this morning. I'm like getting up at 5:45 every morning. I'm like in bed with my book. Like, I fell asleep reading last night at like 9:30, and he's like, I walked in at 9:40 and you had like one eye open with your book, and then you finally decided to put it down. I'm like, yep, that's right. That's me. I'm like the old man who mutes commercials if I watch commercials at all. So
yes,
I love the relatability of that statement. Sleep is so important. I mean, if you listen to Dave, who I mentioned, like as far as like aging backwards tenets, like sleep, he studied his own sleep for 20 years to get all this data to help everyone sleep better. So he's the king of like building companies that solve problems that he sees and doesn't see solutions to. So sleep is a huge one.
That's amazing. I'm super curious about him now. I'm gonna have to go check this stuff out.
Yeah, he has a new book coming out soon that's like pre-order on Amazon, but the one that I read a few years ago is called Superhuman, and it's about aging backwards, and it can be pretty heady and a lot of science in it, but there were a ton of great takeaways, and he just knows everything. Like, blue blockers aren't enough for me because there's all sorts of different lights, so you need different glasses at different times, and that can be overwhelming. But like at a very basic level of like being the best human and living the longest possible, it's all about like it bugs me kind of that his podcast is and we could go on and on about this, but it's billed as like alternative health, when it's like we're talking about sleep, we're talking about like mindfulness, meditation, breath work, and nutrition, what you're putting into your body, how you're thinking about things, light therapies, all these things that, you know, I think are very basic, that are billed as like alternative because they're not like supported by like pharmaceutical companies in the same way.
Right.
He's just incredible. And I think his next book actually you would love, because it's called Working Smarter, Not Harder, or something like that, which we all need more of. It's kind of like a Tim Ferriss-y vibe, but all into biohacking and that kind of thing. And he knows so much. You'd think he's a doctor, but he's just a guy who went to Wharton and was like super overweight and had all this brain fog and was like, why am I almost failing out of Wharton? I'm so smart and have this awesome like career in Silicon Valley. And then went to a doctor and discovered all these things about himself that he reversed through like diet and testing and neuroscience, and is now building all these companies to help other people not have to spend $1 million fixing themselves. Yeah.
Okay, I'm on it. This is like so up my alley.
Great. Yeah, and his podcast is awesome too. I'm listening to him interview Joe Dispenza, who everybody has been telling me about lately too. And then he had another really awesome like yogi or somebody that I was going to listen to next. So I think his podcast is called The Human Upgrade.
Oh, how fantastic. How fascinating, honestly.
Yeah. All right. Thank you everyone for listening to this conversation with Stef. I'm going to let her get off on her day because we could talk about these things all day. And I love just nerding out about all these things about building businesses and communications and everything. So thank you for listening to this episode of The Coast. Thank you to Stef. Check out Tschida Communications. Where can people find you before we let you go?
Sure. You can come to tschidacommunications.com or Stef Tschida out on LinkedIn. I live and breathe out on LinkedIn, so it's a really easy place to find me. And Tschida is a little bit of a crazy last name. It's Tschida. A bit of a doozy.
I was gonna ask you to spell it because I'm like, it doesn't sound like the animal, the big cat.
Right. Right.
Well, thank you, Stef, and everyone listening. Check us out for another awesome episode next week, and make sure you go to Stef's website because it's extremely impressive the way that she has graphs and tables and all sorts of awesome resources.
Thank you so much, Whitney.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
This episode's music was provided by Sloan Best.
And editing provided by Kayla Shu.